The moment that Mom and Sarah were alone, Mom questioned, "You didn't say anything wrong, did you?" Sarah turned her head from Mom and stared out the tiny window, trying hard not to cry. "Sarah," Mom persisted, feeling anger well up inside her for fear that Sarah might have told the doctor about what takes place at home. "What did you say?" Still saying nothing and slightly moving away from Mom so she wouldn't accidentally touch her arm, Sarah again ignored her mom's questions. "Hello, welcome to In My Words. The book I am reading from is titled The Monster We Call Dad by D.A. Riles. This book is not intended for young readers. After each reading session, I will briefly give information about a chosen plant. I hope through my words you will gain insight, knowledge, and a deeper appreciation and understanding of this mysterious and intricate world. Though the road may be long and hard, compassion and beauty can be gained through the enjoyment of nature and experiencing its wondrous gifts. Thank you for joining me." "Has your arm been hurting long?" Sarah stayed mute. She wanted to tell what happened, but was frightened to let anyone know. She didn't want to have to feel the force of the monster again. Besides, for some strange reason, she had a need to defend her dad. Gently, the doctor turned Sarah's face toward him. "It's okay," Dr. Lester continued softly. "I won't ask you any more questions, okay?" Smiling with a slight withered dimple, he added, "I'll make your arm all better." Touching the top of the child's head, Dr. Lester walked away as the technician entered the room to take the x-rays. When the technician was done, she sent Sarah out to the waiting room to be with her mom. Now all they had to do was wait a little longer for Doctor to read the x-rays and call them back into his office. The moment that Mom and Sarah were alone, Mom questioned, "You didn't say anything wrong, did you?" Sarah turned her head from Mom and stared out the tiny window, trying hard not to cry. "Sarah," Mom persisted, feeling anger well up inside her for fear that Sarah might have told the doctor about what takes place at home. "What did you say?" Still saying nothing and slightly moving away from Mom so she wouldn't accidentally touch her arm, Sarah again ignored her mom's questions. Seeing the strange behavior from her daughter, who always wanted her attention, deeply concerned Jane. But just as she was about to make Sarah talk, the nurse walked in and took a seat at the front desk. Jane had no choice but to drop the subject. What seemed like hours to Sarah was only 30 minutes. That's when the nurse brought them back into the office. Mom sat in the chair as her young daughter stood vigilantly by her side. Holding the x-ray in his hand as he entered the room, Dr. Lester said with trepidation, "Sarah has a dislocated shoulder. There had to be significant force to cause this type of dislocation." Sarah saw the doctor's face. It didn't look happy. Actually, he looked angry. Pushing into her mom's leg, Sarah shied away from the doctor. She felt guilty, as if it were her fault that she was hurt. Mom gently pushed Sarah off her leg and gave her a disagreeable look. Looking down at the floor, Sarah pouted. Feeling concerned for Sarah's safety, Dr. Lester prodded Jane one more time. "Are you sure you don't know how this happened?" "I have no idea," Jane said in a defensive tone. "You've seen my kids. They've come in here needing stitches to sew up busted lips and bitten tongues because they jumped off the garage or down from the tree." Jane really didn't know how this could have happened. However, she could never rule out her husband. Feeling dejected, Jane wanted to leave the office quickly, but knew if she did, it would show suspicion upon their family. Just as Jane finished the outburst, a nurse walked in. Sarah looked at how this nurse was dressed. She noticed the knee-length skirt, a white blouse, and a white hat. She looked very sterile, and her face looked stern. Sarah turned away from the lady, for she wasn't the kind young nurse that she saw earlier in the office. Feeling awful for causing so much trouble, Sarah felt bad for Mom, because Mom really didn't know anything that had happened, but Sarah was unwilling to tell on Dad. From Mom, she knew she would get rejection. From Dad, she would get hit. No matter what she did, she would be the loser in the end. Knowing he would receive no real answers, Dr. Lester gave in and said, "Perhaps she fell wrong." With defeat in his voice, he said no more on the subject. Taking in a deep breath to compose himself, he told Jane what he needed to do to put Sarah's shoulder back in place. Jane didn't fully understand what her part was, so she waited for further instructions. The nurse worked together with Jane to hold Sarah still. "This is going to hurt," Dr. Lester said in a pained voice to the small child, "but it will only take a moment." More gently, he added, "It will make your arm feel much better." For the first time in days, Sarah squeaked out the word, "Why?" as her lips started to quiver. "You know how your arm feels now?" he questioned lightly. "I'm going to make it feel better, but you need to be brave, okay?" he said gently, touching Sarah's cheek. Sarah nodded sadly, and then she stayed very still. The nurse grabbed under Sarah's armpit and leaned her head on the child's shoulder. Mom held Sarah's legs so she wouldn't wiggle. The doctor gave one quick yank as Sarah's shoulders slipped back into place. A slight squeak of pain escaped the child's mouth as tears trickled down her face. But then the pain was gone. Her shoulder felt so much better. Relief flowed through the innocent girl's body. Her shy smile was telling the helpful doctor, "Thank you." He understood completely as he gently touched her unhurt shoulder. "Does it feel all better now?" he asked before the mom and daughter left the room. Sarah nodded yes. "Soon you'll be able to play again, but not for a little while, okay? Your mom will let you know when you can do things again." He smiled broadly. "You'll be fine," he reassured his young patient. Listening intently, Jane heard what Dr. Lester was explaining to her. He told her what she needed to do to help Sarah's shoulder heal. A few moments later, Mom and daughter left the office. Jane arrived home with Sarah. Thomas was waiting for them in the living room. Not much ever adorned the living room, just the old worn sofa, the big chair, a floor lamp, and Big Bessie. Big Bessie is what Thomas called the window air conditioner. Only Jane and he were allowed to touch it. Reclining on the couch, Thomas watched as Jane and Sarah entered into the living room. Almost to himself, he said, "See, there's nothing wrong with her. She just wanted attention." Trying to hide her irritation with her husband, Jane replied, "The doctor said she had a dislocated shoulder. He put it back in place at the office." Jane pushed on, slight annoyance showing in her voice. "She's not supposed to use it for a little while." Then finishing in a rush, Jane added, "Otherwise it might become dislocated again." Jane knew she was being a little too assertive for Thomas, but at that moment she was very angry that Sarah was hurt so badly. With one last quick comment, Thomas's wife said, "Do you know how this might have happened?" Not knowing what Thomas might do, Jane cowered a bit as she saw his face become somber. "Nope," was all Thomas said. Jane never brought it up again. Today's highlighted plant is tomato. There are determinate and indeterminate tomatoes. Determinate tomatoes grow to a specified height. Indeterminate tomatoes continue to grow until a hard frost stops the growth. A light frost will not kill off all of your tomatoes, but it will certainly stunt the tomatoes and will cause the flowers to fall off of the plant. Tomatoes come in many different colors. Along with the different colors are the sizes and shapes. The colors are red, green, green stripe, pink, yellow, orange, deep purple to almost black color. There is also white, burgundy, a lighter purple, and some tomatoes have streaks. The shapes vary from round to oval or heart shape, pear shape, or oblong. They also come in many different sizes. The smallest is named spoon. These are the approximate size of a red currant, which are very tiny, perhaps an eighth to a quarter of an inch large. I'm not exactly certain. I've never measured them. The largest is generally considered the beef steak. However, there was a grower in Minnesota that grew a tomato that was recorded to weigh 11.65 pounds. But there is debate as to whether or not the grower had the largest tomato. For there was another tomato that was reported to weigh 16 8.85 pounds, but this one was not officially recorded. My point is, tomatoes can be so tiny that you can pop several of them into your mouth at one time, or so large that you would have to use a large knife to cut through it. Tomato flavors range from super sweet to mild to paste to mildly tart. If a tomato tastes bitter, that's because it was picked too early from the vine and it needs to ripen. Keep in mind that the earlier you pick the tomato, the less nutrients will be in that tomato. However, you don't want to pick them too late either, for they will start to rot, become mushy, and be inedible. Tomatoes can be baked, fried, cooked, dehydrated, or frozen. They can also be eaten raw. I will talk about freezing the tomatoes in just a moment. Tomatoes are a very handy snack and they store well. For dehydrating, if you dehydrated the sweet or super sweet tomatoes, they'll taste just like candy. And as for my children and my grandchildren, they love eating them. So do I. They're very, very tasty. For paste tomatoes, they are great for making pastes such as spaghetti sauce, salsa sauce, and other types of sauces that you may enjoy. Beefsteak tomatoes are perfect for using as a sliced tomato for sandwiches and in salads. As for freezing tomatoes, it is very easy. Just keep in mind that when it comes time to eat them, they will no longer be firm and they will be mushy. This is perfectly normal. I usually make them into tomato soup or sauce for spaghetti or other recipes that call for softer tomatoes. For freezing, rinse and dry the tomato. Put them into a freezer-safe container and then set them into the freezer and allow them to freeze. And that's all there's to it. You have your frozen tomato. It's very easy and it's a great way to save your extra tomatoes. As for tomatoes, I could talk about them for hours. There are so many things that they can be used for. Also, there's much information about growing tomatoes, how to make them grow faster or larger, but I will not get into that for now. So today's highlighted plant was the tomato. Please like, share, and subscribe. I look forward to having you join me again next time, where I will highlight another plant, and I will continue to read from the book titled The Monster We Call Dad by D.A. Riles, which you can purchase from Amazon.com. Thank you for having joined me.